Hello guys, and welcome back to Black Data. Let's look at a very interesting topic today, which is the African Union. The African Union was created in 1999. It was actually a upgrade of the Organization of African Unity, which was created in 1953. This was right after Africa kicked out all the invaders or colonialists, whatever you want to call them. The African head of states got together and tried to form a kind of union. This was because they were quite concerned that, look, we've just got our independence. We got to make sure that, we keep working together to secure our resources, our finance, our culture, and our territories. So they created the Organization African Unity in 1953. Now, in 1999, Muammar Gaddafi of Libya called all the African head of states together again. They had a meeting, and they decided that the Organization of African Unity was not really having an impact in terms of their aims and their policies. So they decided to create a new body called the African Union. But just to start off with, so look, I'm on their website right now, and we can see here, let's just go through this very briefly. So it says, the African Union, AU, is a continental body consisting of 55 member states that make up the countries of the African continent. It was officially launched in 2002 as a successor to the Organization of African Unity. So, what are the regions of the African Union? So we have the Western region, the Northern region, the Central region, Eastern region, and Southern region. So African Union have actually done a good job of getting all the 55 countries to sign the African Union pact that they want to be part of the Union. But as you can see, we also have some observer states. And so they would sit in most of their meetings to just observe what is going on, which I find quite questionable. But I guess that's the way it is right now. So who heads the African Union? So the African Union is actually headed by the current president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, or Ramaphosa, depending on how you pronounce it. And he is actually the chairperson at the moment. So it says that the chairperson of the African Union is the ceremonial head of the African Union, elected by the Assembly Head of States and Governments for a one-year term. It rotates among the continent's 5 regions. So ceremonial position. So which means he's going to be an overseer of what's going on, but he's not really involved in the day-to-day running of things. That is done by the chairman of the African Union Commission. So the African Union inaugurates an African Union Commission, which then has a chairperson. And so this guy here, Moussa Faki, is the chairperson of the African Union Commission, and he has a lot of powers in terms of some of the policies that are put in place, and even some of the appointments of some of the most important key representatives. Moussa Faki, who is the chairperson of the African Union, also gets to nominate ambassadors to different regions of the world for the African Union. And one of his most celebrated appointments is this lady right here, Dr. Arikana Chihombori Quao. And she is the ambassador of the AU to the United States. Well, she used to be. Let's hear her talk for a minute.
It wasn't bad enough that we were divided up into the tiny little countries that we are today. conference gave us one other thing that France did between 1958 and 1961 in the name of giving us our independence as African countries. France forced the Francophone, and I hate that terminology. There is no such thing as Francophone, Anglophone. They made it up. But for the purposes of communication, I will use that. 14 of those countries, they said, in order for you to get your independence from us, you must sign this document. You thought they could have found a better name for the document. The document was called the Pact for the Continuation. I repeat, the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. We are talking about giving you independence, but sign this pact for the continuation of colonization in a different format. And I'm going to highlight some of those issues that they said you must agree to if you are going to be independent. Hello.
Okay, so you get the picture. She's very fiery. And this is what actually got her fired by this guy. And in this speech right here, she was talking about how France, and I'm going to put it in raw words, pretty much took the piss with the colonies that it had in Africa right before the independence of all these colonies. And it's interesting history that most of us do not know. It's important for us to understand what's happened in the past. So if you have some time, check out this video. I'll leave it in the link. But another ambassador of the AU is this guy. His name, Ambassador AJ Bramdio, and he is the African Union ambassador to the European Union. Let's just hear him speak for a couple of minutes.
That is indeed a good question, because I think our focus most of the time is on trying to constantly evaluate and assess the progress we make in our relations with the EU across all spheres of cooperation. And since the Africa-EU partnership started, we've been trying to establish action plans which would actually be able to deliver on the objectives of our partnership. Our joint strategy has been in place. It's a good strategy. We need to still reach a level of understanding where the benefits are more mutual. At the moment, from the African perspective, we believe that it is Europe that continues to benefit out of this partnership more than Africa does. And the footing in the partnership has not reached a level where we could say the playing field is level, we know where the goalposts are, and that we are going to be equal partners.
Okay, so this is AJ Bramdio, who is the African Union ambassador to the European Union. And I mean, you can compare it to Arikana, Chihombori, Quao. Compare the way they talk and what they're talking about. And I don't know, is it just me, or does it look like there's not much fire in this guy? And this guy is the ambassador of the African Union to Europe. And what he's saying here is saying, look, we're not on equal playing fields. European Union is still benefiting a lot more from African Union. But we are not going to do anything about it. We're just going to keep on trying. And I think that that's actually one of the problems that we have as Africans, when we kind of take a very laid-back approach to our problems and waiting for it to solve itself, or for somebody to come and solve it. But look, those are discussions for another day. So let's move forward swiftly. So this is the majestical headquarters of the African Union. And I'll show you this picture here. It's quite beautiful. It's very nice, you know, the building. It was built by China. And it wasn't just built by China. It was funded by China. I remember hearing the news when it was completed, and, you know, the red tapes and all that. And there was so much celebration. And I thought, hang on, so China came into Africa and said, oh, we love your African Union initiative and your organization. We are going to build your headquarters. And everybody said, great, go for it. And I thought, but in life, guys, nothing is free. The person handing you that free stuff has something to gain. So we can see here, China rejects claim it bugged headquarters built for the African Union. Now the backstory to this was that they found out that the African Union was bugged. And there were like microphones hidden in different areas in the complex, I believe. And also like malware and bugs inside the networking and computer systems. And once this was found out, China came out and, as they would normally do, just denied it basically and said, no, we didn't do it. The only country that could have done it had to be China. So if you want to read this article, I will leave a link in the description. So, I mean, they did an investigation into this, and this is what they found out. So as you can see here, China gifted the African Union a headquarters building. I mean, come on, man, that's just ridiculous. Who pays so much money for a building for somebody else? It just doesn't happen. And this is one of the problems that African faces. We keep on relying on aid and handouts and hoping that other people will come and help us. And that's why Africa has never really grown, because our leaders, to be honest, want to be lazy. They don't want to do the hard work to get that financial independence and do stuff on their own. They would rather somebody else comes in and do it for them for a little bit for some perks here and there. So it says China gifted the African Union a headquarters building and then allegedly blocked it for state secrets. It says here, in an investigation published by French newspaper Le Monde, China, which also paid and built the computer network at the AU, they literally built the computer network, allegedly inserted a backdoor that allowed it to transfer data. The hack wasn't detected until January 2017, when technicians noticed that between midnight and 2 a.m. every night, there was a peak in data usage, even though the building was empty. After investigation, it was found that the continental organization's confidential data was being copied onto a server in Shanghai. I mean, I laugh while I'm reading that because it's just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's unfounded. I mean, why are they surprised? It's literally copying everything that has been done in the building and copying it to another server outside Africa. And I guess that's what you get when you rely on somebody to do something free for you, because now we understand how data is very, very important. Who funds the African Union? But there is not a lot of talk on how it's funded. Now, I did a quick search on this, and it says the two major sources of funding of the AU are African member states and donors. The donors is a bit questionable. Donors? Who is donated to the African Union? You are supposed to be an independent body. So I went back to the African Union to find out, okay, how are you being funded? And down here, it says, in July 2016, the Assembly of Heads of States and Government adopted the decision directing all African Union member states to implement a 0.2% levy on eligible imports to finance the African Union. So this just means member states would put a surcharge on goods coming in that are not from Africa, goods coming in outside Africa. They put a surcharge on that, and then the money they generate from that, they hand it over to the African Union, which is an ingenious way of funding the organization, because it means that you are actually not paying any money. You're getting the money from a surcharge on goods coming into your country from outside Africa. So the African Union actually has a partnership with the EU. And it's quite interesting because down here it says, on the same page, and I'll put a link into this as well, the European Union Investment Bank has committed over 25 billion euros to support more than 1,200 public and private sector projects in Africa, with a focus on developing infrastructure and financial sector and improving access to finance for MSMEs. Okay, so we're beginning to get a picture of how the African Union is being funded. The same website, Africa-EU Partnership, and it says, the African Union Alliance is a coherent economic strategy for EU-Africa relations. It defines job creation as the key target and African and European investment as the main vehicle, focusing on areas with the greatest potential for jobs and added value creation. Now, I want you to focus on, it says it defines job creation as the key target. Job creation. So do we understand what this means? Job creation. So which means the partnership is for EU to extend their companies into Africa, and those companies employing Africans, which means Africans are going to be working for these multinational companies inside Africa to create profits for Europeans. But when you word it this way, it sounds great. Like, well, they're bringing jobs. Yeah, but what kind of jobs are they bringing? Is it mining jobs? Is it factory jobs? Are they building all these companies? Are they building all these mining industries and hiring locals to do the dirty work? Also, I came across this document, the European Union and the African Union. So this is kind of a statistical portrait of how the two work together and what are the differences. I'm not going to go through everything because it's a long read, but I think I'll put a link in the description. But this is what really caught my attention. So if we go all the way down here, there we go. So I'm going to read this. I know it's a long read, but I'll go through it very quickly. It says the population projection up to 2050 shows a continuation of the trend with Africa's population forecast to more than double between 2010 and 2050 to reach over 2 billion. Over the same period, the population of Europe as a whole, after an initial increase, is projected to decline between 2020 and 2050. Within the European Union total, EU 27 population is projected to continue to grow up to 2040 before declining in the final decade to 2050. So, basically, what that is saying is that, as you can see here, in 2010, Africa has a population of 14.8%. EU has a population of 7.3%. So Africa is literally, in population, double the size. But in 2050, that would have increased even further, and Africa would be almost 5 times the population of the European Union. So the African Union will be 5 times, almost 5 times the population of the European Union. And so it begs the question that why are we struggling in our partnership? So we've got, African Union's got all these partnerships with all these other bodies and all these other countries that it would become quite difficult for African Union as a body to make decisions on their own for their people without any outside influence. And they've kind of set the stage for that by accepting donations and partnerships. Why? The only reason I can think this is happening is because, number one, member states are not sticking to their 0.2% that they need to be paying to the African Union. And also, member states, most of them, are lazy. They don't want to do the hard work. They don't want to build up their economy. They would rather get somebody else to do that for them. So, here is the breakdown of the partnership the African Union has. So, external partnership between AU and the organizations, regions, and countries. Look, African League of Arab States, they're funding the African Union. The African South American Cooperation Forum, African Union Commission, which is a United States body, China Africa Cooperation Forum, that is for China. Tokyo International Conference on Africa Development, that's from Japan. African India, India, Turkey, and even Korea, and partner management and coordination. So we've got a few bodies here that are involved in the funding of the African Union, which means the African Union is not actually African Union. African Union is African Union in partnership with EU, America, India, Turkey, Korea, and anybody out there who has money to put into it. And I think that's really, really discouraging. So finally, let's nail the coffin shots. It says here, however, 72% of AU's budget is funded by external partners, which creates risks associated with fiscal constraints experienced by the economies of these partners and overdependence, thereby undermining ownership of programs by Africans. So this kind of summarizes the AU is not funded by AU only, and so is exposed to influence from other bodies. So, and I thought, you know what, let's go and have a look at the EU and see how are they managing their own budget. You know, how do they do this? Because European Union and African Union are quite similar. And as you can see here, it says EU budget own resources. An explanation of the three types of own resources of European Union budget, which provides the EU's main revenue, and the correction mechanism designed and compensate imbalances in national contributions. So that kind of tells us exactly how they get their money and exactly how they fund. But then here, it actually makes it very clear. It says how the EU is funded. The EU sources of income includes contribution from member countries, import duties on products from outside the EU, and fines imposed when businesses fail to comply to EU rules. The EU countries agreed on the size of the budget and how it is to be financed several years in advance. So, I don't see any third body funding the EU. I don't see Bank of India or Bank of Korea or Bank of America or Bank of China. And that's why the EU is very powerful. And that is why the European Union could be half the African Union size, and they are benefiting more from the African Union. All right, so let's move on. But who funds the African Union? So we go down here and let's see what it says. At the top of the list of AU development partners are countries such as Canada, Sweden, Germany, Netherlands, United States, United Kingdom, Spain, China, and Turkey, as well as organizations such as World Bank and European Union, the paper state. So we could have a consensus here to say that the African Union is not actually the African Union. The African Union is a union with partnership. And look, there's nothing wrong in having partnerships. I believe the EU will probably have partnerships with other bodies, but not in terms of their finance. Because if somebody finances your body, they are able to influence you. They will have a say in who you put in power, who you put in specific positions to strategic positions. And that's why I think the inception of AU at the beginning was great by Muammar Gaddafi. But as time has gone on, and they killed Gaddafi, by the way, they overthrew his government, and now Libya is in chaos. The AU is just a body for other countries to take advantage of. That's how it's been set up. So, and it's funny because in this piece it says it's Africa's turn to leave the European Union. Yeah, I know it's all talk. Are we doing anything about it? No. Are we going to leave the European Union? No. We love European Union so much, especially this guy right here. This guy, as I said earlier, he's the chairperson of the African Union Commission, and he's the guy that fired former AU ambassador to US. He got rid of her because she was talking too much about France, and he happens to be from Chad, which used to be a France colony, and is really in line with what France does. And you can tell that, I'm sorry to say, guy, but I see coonery all over. All right, so So we've gone over the African Union, and I assure you, if you need to go over what the African Union does, the body, what it's all about, please visit their website here and go through it. There's so much information on there. But this is my take on it, because this channel Black Data is not just for giving you information about different bodies, different things happening on the African continent, backed up with data, but also to give you some pointers onto what we should be doing and how we can make this happen. I know me and you, Africans, will want an African Union that is independent, that has control of its own people and has control of its own policies. So, African Union, what are the first things they need to do? Eradicate all foreign influence. What China did before it became a superpower is they closed down their borders and they worked internally. Build up an economy that works, build up a people that love who they are, and that was the first thing that China did. African Union didn't do that. I mean, there are even some countries right now that they have border dispute. So eradicate all foreign influence is vital to the success of what AU is trying to do. Build an African army. Now, I haven't seen anybody talking about this, but this is vital, guys. This is vital. Africa needs its own army. And I'm not talking about peacekeeping army and all that rubbish, because yes, they do have a peacekeeping sort of agreement with other countries, but in conjunction with and some other bodies. So, but it's a peacekeeping mission. So, which means if there's issues happening, you go there to resolve it, but you don't have an army. But the EU has NATO, which is the powerful force. So you can't build a body if you don't have strategies and infrastructures in place to defend the body. So building an African army is absolutely important. And obviously, because of our partnership with all these other interests, like the EU, for example, it's not an important policy for the EU. So the EU is not going to go to the AU and say, hey, you know what? We want you to build an African army. They won't do that because that's against their own interests. So it's up to Africans to take their own issues and put it on top of the priority list instead of letting foreigners put their own priority on our priority list. So, for example, the EU wants trade. That's their priority. So they're going to push for trade. They're going to encourage you to trade with them. They're going to say they're going to give you money so you can create, lend you money so you can create businesses in collaboration with their businesses. But an African priority would be to secure the border, to have an army to defend you, especially if you have been enslaved before. Anyway, so let's move on. Another point is revamp the educational system. This is just absolutely vital, because believe it or not, if you're African and you're watching this, you are damaged. And I know that's a bit excessive. So am I. I'm damaged as well. And why do I say that? If you are African and you went to school, from nursery school to primary school, and your whole educational system was based on the West, then it means that you're thinking like a Westerner. I don't care how conscious you are, how woke you are, there are still some things that you would be doing because of the way you were brought up, because of the things you were taught. Now, we are trying as much as possible to train our brain to think like Africans as to thinking like Westerners. So, and that's difficult. But you cannot compare that to a child that was brought up with an educational system that centers around African self-love. You just can't equate it. So until we bring up a whole generation of people that love who they are and that know about their history and about the great things they've done, we would never be able to defeat, and I use that word specifically, defeat the problems we are facing, because it is a war. And a lot of Africans do not understand that right now. And hopefully, at some point, not too late, they would. The fourth point is poverty. And poverty is just rife all over Africa. Yeah, you will go to the cities and the cities are great, but 60% of the population lived in rural areas, only 40% that lived in cities in Africa. So yes, you might go to cities and you might see it's great, but the majority of the population are in abject poverty. And it's shameful to see all these countries with their leaders with massive mansions and massive buildings, but their people are suffering. And last but not the least, strengthening social and legal institutions. And this is one of the major issues where Africa can't move forward. I mean, if you cannot prosecute somebody for doing something wrong, then your institutions are not working. So strengthening the social and legal institutions is important. So there's accountability for anything you do whilst you are in office. So that's all I've got for you guys. Hopefully, leave some comments below. There's so much to learn about the African Union and how it works and what it does. There might have been some things that I've missed out. And if you would like that to be added, just add it in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts about the African Union. Do you think it's a strong body? Do you think it would morph with time to something better? Do you think it's better to scrap it and start something else? Or do you think, look, we need it, and even though it's not perfect, with time it will get better? But all in all, the trajectory, in my opinion, doesn't look great. We don't have the infrastructures and policies in place. At the moment, our priority is not our own priority. The priority of the African Union is the priority for everybody else, every other body that is part of the African Union. So we're talking about increasing trade, creating jobs. No, what Africa needs is the 5 points I've listed here. And if a Western person looks at this and says, nah, that's not what we want to do, then obviously it's the right thing to do. Now that I've gotten older and I've kind of realized the illusion that we're living in, and I use illusion because what we were taught was what they wanted us to know. We weren't taught a lot of other things that could have helped us in discovering who we are, and also discovering what has been done to us to be able to stop repeating the same mistakes. So the AU is about to repeat the same mistake of the OAU, which is even worse. But I'm putting this video out there so people can do more research into AU and see what it's all about. But I'm telling you now, the way the AU stands right now is only to enrich the Westerners, to give access to our people, our market, our land, and our resources. Yes, there are some things they are doing that is great, that is good, but for you to build a strong organization or body, the foundation needs to be built well. The foundation needs to be strong. The foundation needs to be self-loving and not loving other groups of people. So, this is Black Data, signing off.